One time, I remember, he got up, he put his housecoat on, and it was 20 below. And he opened the front door, and I was asleep. And all of a sudden, I heard the doorbell ring. And I knew it was him. And he had gotten out of bed and opened the front door. And there was a light on the doorbell, so he rang it. And I came down, and it was no big deal to him. He didn't know anything. I was fortunate that he knew how to ring the doorbell because I brought him in. He would have frozen to death. It was a journey that I don't wish it on anybody. He was somewhere else. You know the trips that you used to make from Toronto. The last time I think you played the sax together, and he wouldn't know who you are.
I remember walking in the door, and he was there, and I, of course, said, "Dad, how you doing?" And I hugged him, but his eyes were vacant.
You remember that?
Yeah, that was devastating.
Yeah.
It's the first time he didn't know who I was.
Recognize who you are, no.
I'm Rob Cribb, and this is The Ultimate Choice. It's been illuminating diving into the key question at the heart of this podcast. When is a life no longer worth living? And how far should the state go in helping Canadians end their lives? What's standing out for me most as we wrap our series is the incredible honesty everyone brought to this question. It's been a privilege to spend some of the most intimate moments of their lives with Michael and Anne, their Dr. Nav, and their Pastor Steve. And with Mason, who's paying close attention to the promised expansion of medically assisted death. But the Canadian government has now delayed its expansion again, forcing people like Mason and others to wait until 2027. So we reached out to Senator Pamela Wallin, one of the most passionate and blunt voices in this debate. Senator Wallin has seen a lot in her lifetime. She's been a television anchor and a journalist for major media outlets in Canada, including my own paper, the Toronto Star. She was a Canadian diplomat in New York City post 9/11, and now she's an independent senator in the Canadian Parliament. She's also part of the Special Joint Committee on Medical Assistance in Dying. We don't have to worry about this at the Toronto Star newsroom.
It's all good?
Just check it for filings.
Nobody checks my tie at the Toronto Star.
Nobody at the Toronto Star knows what a tie is, except
That's
Yes.
true. That's true. That's true.
That's always been true since I was there 100 years ago.
Yeah? We met up at the Toronto headquarters for TVO Today on a brightly lit TV set. But our conversation was far from political message tracking. I'd call it unplugged. And it took us in a very raw direction, back to our families and to my own mom and dad, Nadia and Jack.
Senator Wallin, thank you. Thanks for doing this.
My pleasure.
We appreciate it. Appreciate you taking the time. You've been a big voice on this issue. We went back and looked at some of your statements over the years on this issue. Let's talk about how you got here. You're an independent senator. You can pick and choose issues that you want to advocate for in the public interest. There's a wide spectrum of them.
Yep.
How did you land on assisted death?
Well, I think it is something in the first place that I grew up with. My father worked in a small town hospital in Saskatchewan. We always had very pragmatic discussions around the supper table about health. Under what conditions did people have a quality of life? Very seldom does a young person have that discussion about quantity versus quality when it comes to life. So this conversation started with my parents when they were both very 100% with it, not ill. We talked about wills. We talked about their end of life care decisions, how they saw this.
Did your mother or father explicitly say at any point, I want you to end my life if I got to that point?
Oh, my dad just said, I will deal with it, because there were no rules. And, he essentially, in the end, just stopped eating and made that decision for himself. And the night that he died, the old nurse, it was New Year's Eve, so the older nurses were back in, filling in for the younger ones who were out celebrating. And she said, why don't you go home and just have a shower? You've been here for, 12 hours today, and you've been here for 12 hours every day. So just, go home and have a shower. And she said, I'll call you. So I went, had a shower for 1 minute, and the phone was ringing when I got out. And she said, your father's gone. And I thought, it's heartbreaking. I went back to the hospital, and she just looked at me and she said, men in particular want to do this alone. And so I gave him that opportunity by sending you home, and he took it. So, I think that my mother she died the night of his funeral, a week after his death. And wow. I think that was, even on some unconscious level, I think people with Alzheimer's know when that connection is broken with the love of their life, right?
So you were bearing witness to both of their deaths at the same time.
Exactly, within a week. So it made me, watching those two strong, amazing individuals have to depart in such an undignified way, made me angry. I was upset, obviously, but also angry that they didn't have options to leave earlier and on their own terms.
And you draw a straight line between what you witnessed then to what you're saying today.
100%. And I've subsequently had I will say this, I will use the word opportunity, to be with people who have chosen MAID. And it has only reinforced my belief in how important this is. A very good friend who was stage 4 cancer, her 4th round of cancer, she phoned me, and I said, so what do you want to do? And she said, I want to do that thing you're on about in the Senate. And I said, MAID. And so we talked about what she needed to do with her doctors and the palliative care, and just the sense of control and closure it gave her to say goodbye, to have her friends gather. We had a big Thanksgiving dinner. People went to her room one by one to say their final goodbyes. And she was so at peace. And in the process, of course, and even at the last moment, the doctors are obliged to say, are you sure? Mm-hmm. And she was always a bit of a drama queen anyway, but she said, yes, I'm so sure. And then she just went, goodbye, and with that gesture, and that she got to have that moment. So it was a gift to us who are her friends, and MAID was a gift to her to give her some control.
I have to ask you, in many ways we have a lot in common on this. My dad died from Alzheimer's, and I learned not that long ago, I had asked my mother if he ever got to that point to end his life, because his father had it and his grandfather had it. And I don't think I realized it. I've been working on this issue for a long time too, and I'm not sure I understood it until we began working on this podcast. And it wasn't conscious to me, but I think I've come to the realization that it's because of my dad. When you're speaking in the Senate on this issue, when you're speaking to journalists like me in moments like this, do you ever think of them?
All the time. I mean, they're the, they're the raison d'etre, right? They're the ones that created the passion. And then I happened to be in the right place at the right time, which is in the Senate of Canada when the Supreme Court ruled. And it was a great moment because people put down all the party lines and all of that and gathered around specific issues. My cause and my passion has always been advance requests because of the catch-22 that catches those with dementia, Alzheimer's, a cognitive disease, because they don't fall into the typical physical illness and they don't fall into the mental illness category. So they are left. And that one it just became so clear to me. And so, no, I mean, there isn't an hour that goes by that I don't think of these discussions that everybody's engaged in. They're there, they're present, they're the ones in the back of my mind. I mean, it's also very personal. I mean, having witnessed people that you love leave in such a difficult way also makes you think about, I don't ever want to be in that position. I want the right to make an advance request because my mother and my grandmother did have Alzheimer's. So what are the chances? They're good. So I would like to have my own exit strategy ready.
Do you mind if I read you something? You've spoken very passionately and articulately in the Senate on this issue.
Okay.
You're speaking about your parents. The laws denied them the right to be heard, the right to have their lifelong wishes respected, the desire to end their life
at a
time
and
in a manner of their choosing.
in a manner of their choosing.
Many of us
who have lived through this nightmare are concerned for our own futures. Alzheimer's is a likely diagnosis in my life, given my family history. I have no children, no husband to advocate for me. So please, let me
and others like me make a request in advance. What would they say, looking down on you today, this week, being a vocal advocate on this? How would
you go, girl? I think it'd be pretty clear. They were very, amazing parents who always believed. I mean, my mother basically said, "You don't speak. Feel free to speak and open your mouth, but only once you've done your homework." I mean, she was a teacher, so she did teach us that. And my father, the way he came to it was have the courage of your convictions. So growing up with those two people, they would, I think, be looking down saying, "Thank you. Hope it works out for you and so many others, but just keep fighting."
Do you think about your own death?
Yes, all the time. I mean, it comes with aging to think about death, but I think because I'm so engaged on this issue that I think about it all the time, and it makes me even more militant, if you will, more committed, because I want to have some say. I do not have children. I do not have a husband. This is a decision I need to make. I should have the ability to make that decision. I'm self-sustaining and I'm self-aware. So let me make this decision now.
Can I ask you, and you don't have to answer, when you do think about your own death, what does it look like? Where are you? What's happening?
Well, I'm assuming, I hope wrongly, but I have to kind of take that, the worst case scenario, which is that I am diagnosed with Alzheimer's and that I will have, 3 to 5 to 7 good years. It's unique. It's different for everybody. And that sometime before that begins, we will have had the good sense in this country to allow advance requests so that I can say, these are the situations in case I lose my ability to really say, yes, now is the moment. Understand that these are the circumstances in which I no longer want to carry on. I don't want to be in a room by myself, unaware of who I am or who I once was as a person. Mm-hmm. If you do not have your memory, if you do not have that sense of self, then there is there's very little to get up for in the morning.
And so under that scenario, you would go to sleep one night and your medical professional, your physician would effectively terminate your life.
Well, I'm hoping that we will have a process in place that will be sophisticated enough that this will not be some risky procedure for me or for them, that we will have had that conversation right up until the moments that I no longer had clarity of thought or was unable to express myself or had become nonverbal. Because as you know, if you've gone through this with your family, the symptoms are very unique. You know, they're difficult for everybody. So we're capable of doing this. We're a very sophisticated, intelligent society. We can wrestle difficult ethical and moral issues. We do it all the time. And we just need to have the courage to wrestle this one, to get down to the nitty-gritty, to have these conversations with everybody in your sphere so that they are aware of that, so that people are protected, so your family knows, so they can ready themselves, so that there are protections for the medical professionals involved, so that I will have my wishes honored. We can work at this, we can make it happen.
You've been very generous. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
It's very kind of you. Thank you.
My conversation with Senator Pamela Wallin was unexpected. Her frank honesty and her ongoing anger about her parents' predicament was sobering. She makes it clear that the laws in Canada are not accessible to all Canadians. Those with mental illness as their sole underlying condition have been told to wait in the wings. And those with cognitive illness still don't have the right to declare their wish for an assisted death well in advance. That's the very thing my dad Jack would want if he were asking my mom Nadia for help today.
Let me go back to what you said earlier, that you agree, that you feel the same way as him.
I don't want to live on machines, and I don't want, if I don't know you anymore, be kind to me. That's what he used to say to me. Be kind to me and let me go. I lived enough.
So you have a living will.
Yes, absolutely. You will find it all in the safety deposit box.
What does it say?
It says that if my life takes me to a place where I am hooked to a machine to keep me alive, or I don't remember the exact wording, the lawyer did it, but it gives you the authority to discharge the machine or whatever means that's given me life. And that's what I want.
Okay, but that's if you're in hospital and it is a circumstance where you don't have capacity. What about something like, a terminal illness where, like Dad, which you don't have, thank God, and God forbid you ever do. But if you were in a scenario where you had a long-term deteriorating illness, like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or cancer or whatever it might be, would you choose assisted death?
That I would have to learn a little bit about that.
Making this podcast has allowed me to talk to my mom in a whole new way. I never anticipated we would be recording her own last wishes. And it's pushed me to some unexpected limits. It's made me wonder about the kinds of questions that you might be asking yourself. What do I want out of all of this?
So if at some point I'm faced with this decision, you may well not be around at that point, what might be your advice to me?
It's very difficult for me to give you advice on that. I think that would have to be your decision. I don't think you would want to live the way your dad was, but I don't think you have to worry about it yet. I think.
Can you imagine when Dad was saying these things to you about wanting to end his life, Canada would legalize it?
Never. But those days, Robert, were different from today. Look at technology where we are, and it's still difficult.
It's kind of incredible. This is the generational shift, right? So my father lived in a world where it was murder to do this.
That's very true.
And then here I am.
Oh, please don't put it that way. Nothing is going to happen to you. Just take it, live good, eat good, and technology is changing every day, and you don't know what's down the road. So don't think negatively about it. You're active, you eat well, and don't think that way. You do forget your wallet from time to time, but
More and more. I actually flew here without my wallet. I've never done that before. I flew to
No.
Halifax without my wallet.
yeah, you did.
I mean,
Because, that takes practice. Practice.
It's not a good sign.
No, it isn't a good sign. But it takes with your wallet. I think you always left your wallet, and it takes practice before you leave. Do I have everything I need?
Okay. Thanks for doing this. I actually learned a lot. This is personal stuff. This is hard to talk about. Why did you agree to doing it?
When you go through life and you go through the events that I went through, I read a lot. It changes you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Great job, Mom.
Love you, darling.
Love you.
Oh.
We recorded this final episode at a cottage. It sits on the edge of the Atlantic Ocean in Nova Scotia. I always think about my dad when I'm here. He was a lifetime boater, loved the ocean. My summer weekends growing up were all spent working on a small cabin cruiser next to him. We'd take that boat out to an island out beyond the Halifax harbor. Sometimes soft, still evenings, when the sky burst into orange and pink, we'd forget to leave. We'd just spend the night, staring up as we floated quietly, saying little, but connecting deeply. I've thought a lot about him since we began working on this podcast. I've thought a lot about how he, like all Alzheimer's victims, gradually disappeared before all of us. It's a particular kind of cruelty. As it erased his mind and his character, he knew it was happening, and he was helpless to stop it. After I moved away to university, I'd come home for breaks. Each time I arrived, more of him was missing. And then there was the visit I talked about with my mom. I arrived at the front door to the house. I didn't have my key. He opened the door, stared at me with vacant eyes. I'll never forget. He wasn't there anymore. I hugged him, and then he quietly asked my mother who I was. I now know that my dad, Jack, had wanted to avoid that moment throughout his life. To avoid the fates of his father, and perhaps many other fathers before that. That didn't happen. And I feel deep regret about that. This podcast has been a remarkable meditation on my own mortality. And after everything I've learned from all the conversations we've had, I'm back here, staring out at the sky and the ocean, pondering my own ultimate choice. I am my father's son. His fate may well be mine. And if it is, I now understand the comfort Michael and Anne described to me, knowing the choice is mine. Whether I'll have to make it or not, I can't say yet. But ultimately, there's a choice. And for that, I'm grateful. As we close out our first season, I want to get back to where it all started, with Michael and Anne, who allowed me into their lives at the most difficult time with one goal: to help others.
What would you want Canadians to know based on your very unique perspective? What would you say to those who are listening to this about this legislation?
I'd like you to step back and breathe, because you are not seeing this the way it needs to be seen. Yes, it's a horrible way to go. You're ending a life, just like you would for a dog or a cat. But this is not that kind of ending. Often this is an ending that is chosen as the best of the worst available possibilities. And people do not make this choice lightly, nor easily. And I guarantee you it causes conflict whenever this comes up. But the people making these decisions have had a lot of time to think about it. Often they've been stuck, ill, or in bed, or unable to move on their own. And to have to come to the decision where you say, this is not worth living a life this way, that needs to be respected. It's a terrible decision to have to make, but to have the power and the strength to make it speaks volumes about how we value each other as people.
This season of The Ultimate Choice is reported by me, Rob Cribb, written by Suzanne Reber and me. Produced by Suzanne Reber and Bruce Edwards, who also mixed and sound designed our show. Allison Leighton Brown composed our theme and original music. Jasmine L. Kurd designed our artwork. Field recordings by Damian Kearns, Bruce Edwards, Ian Thompson, and Josh Owen. Jess Alvarenga and Grant Hill are our associate producers. And additional reporting by Masi Khalid-Bari, Declan Keogh, and Max Loslow at the Investigative Journalism Bureau. Ariana Longley and Genevieve Grant at TVO and Wendy Ann Clark at the Investigative Journalism Bureau helped us extend our audience. The Ultimate Choice was created by our executive producer, Suzanne Reber. Our show is a production of TVO Today in collaboration with Piz Gloria Productions, the Investigative Journalism Bureau, and the Toronto Star. Our team at TVO includes Shariar Tajvidi, managing editor of podcasts and digital video, Lori Few, executive producer of digital, and John Ferry, vice president of programming and content. Special thanks to Anne-Marie Owens, editor of the Toronto Star. Thanks also to Blue Rodeo for the use of their iconic song. 5 Days in May is performed by Blue Rodeo, courtesy of Warner Music Canada, by arrangement with Warner Music Group Film and TV Licensing. As we wrap up our series, special thanks to Anne and Michael Fraser, and to my parents, Natty and Jack, and all the families who are facing difficult decisions. If you enjoyed listening to The Ultimate Choice and believe in this kind of deeply reported and immersive storytelling, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening.